Let me show you Africa as an entrepreneur. Africa is a fundamental part of the global economy.
There's a way the world does business and there's a way we do business.
When we put our faith and our trust in God, He's the master strategist and always directs our path. So it's a vibrant, young market with lots of energy.
Along with our diverse cultures, provide us with rich insights into God and His creativity.
There are people building businesses. So come see that Africa.
Welcome back to the Faith-Driven Entrepreneur Africa Foundation Group series. I'm coming to you again from this beautiful park in Nairobi. Isn't it easy to worship God when you're out in nature? That feels especially true in Africa. The animals, the beautiful landscapes, and open skies. One thing I love about living here in Nairobi is that you get all of that mixed in with the energy and drive of a large city. You can see the skyscrapers behind me. This is a place of innovation and commerce where entrepreneurs thrive. But sometimes that thriving comes with a price. We get so caught up in our work that we begin to worship it. Becoming a successful entrepreneur requires a significant investment of our time, energy, and resources. And while work itself is good, there is a fine line between work as an act of worship and work as the object of worship. Faith-driven entrepreneurs are people who refuse to worship work. And this next video gives us a deeper example of this mark.
So when I was 4, I was the youngest. My parents were displaced as part of the Group Areas Act. There's a place in Port Elizabeth called Fairview, where it was an integrated society. And in the late 60s, that integrated society was broken up and people had to be moved. And instead of green and lush, they go to where it's rocky and it's on the outskirts and it's far away from everything. The reality was harsh, but at no point did they blame anybody.
Both our families come out of brokenness, you know. Apartheid really broke up families. It broke up my family terribly, but my father was always but God, you know. So the legacy of God was during the apartheid era is what really, really cemented the families.
Choosing business was a very unlikely path. I don't really know anybody. I'm a guy from the sticks, you know, on the wrong side of the tracks. So for me to ultimately end up there is a miracle in and of itself. I mean, there's a lot of beauty from that.
I think he comes from quite a rock star call it background, coming from Alan Gray, coming from Investec, managing your own unconstrained fund at Momentum, having like full free reign.
In the early 2000s, there was a trend towards people investing not necessarily with a company or with a fund, but with a manager. And Sam was one of those guys who kind of built his reputation saying, this is a guy who really knows how to make money.
I was successful, but I knew, deep down, I knew something wasn't right, you know. I could feel that coming home, it's not right. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew it was there. And with my mom being diagnosed with cancer, that was the catalyst. And I needed to take care of my mom in this moment and my dad.
I mean, who leaves massive corporate, money on the table, all of that, to reset your family and actually to just stop?
I would summarize it. I was fully present in the family. And they got to know me as I am. Dad's not this guy that's flying around and very successful. Dad is, in fact, Dad. I ultimately decided, I made God the main thing, which is God. God doesn't want other things to be above Him in your life. It set us up for the difficult period that was coming. The family principles translated into this culture of no judgment, of acceptance, of working together.
Transparency.
Transparency, yes, that's the word. It's best described as a slow motion train wreck. The share price was falling steadily.
And so people started selling the shares. But there was another group of people who looked at this and said, well, African Bank has now lost about half of its value on the JSE. This looks like an opportunity for us to buy it, because they're saying, we know what we think the business is actually worth. And if the share price has come down, this is a chance for us to buy it at a cheaper price. Sam ended up taking a very big position in African Bank. And so there were people who had a lot of African Bank in their unit trust funds, and those funds lost a lot of money. And the recriminations afterwards were quite severe for some of them.
I've never seen my husband that vulnerable. Sorry. To the point of just utter brokenness and despair, because he had lost so much. And when you lose your reputation in the investment industry, it's your worth, you know. In the investment industry, you are the asset.
When something goes wrong, and something like this that went wrong, people forget all the good. They suddenly forget all the good decisions, investment decisions that were made, all the good performance, past performance, and they look at this one event and suddenly now, oh, Sam's career is over now. It's unforgiving.
So the way a triathlon works is you have 3 disciplines, and you either exercise all of them in a day, or you exercise at least 1 or 2. But it really became crucial to my ability to cope. It doesn't matter if it's raining, it's cold outside, it's snowing, I find a way to do it. It's not really based on my feelings. That rhythm established of getting up early, training every day, just helped me cope through the day. So I'm on this plane, and a previous client is on the plane with me from Cape Town to Joburg. And I see him getting in on the plane, and I'm already seated. And I remember the day because I saw him and I immediately looked down at what I was doing, and I refused to look up because I did not want to make eye contact with him. And I thought I did well, but I got off in Joburg, and as I got off, I walked off the plane, and he was waiting for me outside the plane. I was going to Joburg for my last meeting to try and get the business off the ground. And I said that to him. In a moment of complete weakness, I just told him the full truth. He asked me for a business card, which I gave him, but I just really thought he was being polite. A week later, he called me and he said, I own a stake in Counterpoint Asset Management. I will introduce you to the founder of Counterpoint, and I think that he definitely has a need for someone of your skills. It's quite weird, isn't it? Quite ironic that, you know, that I end up getting the breakthrough when I speak about how I actually have nothing more to give. You know? And that was literally the start of Counterpoint, my involvement with Counterpoint.
Sam came in and I think he just brought a new energy into the business.
Counterpoint was less hierarchical than my previous working environment, and that's something that is powerful.
So when I think of Sam, it's always the people first before the business. If you're okay, he's okay. That's important. He believes in everyone.
So I arrived and I am myself. I came from a broken place. I was broken, but that brokenness led to no ego, you know. I mean, everything's just, I've been stripped of all the things that cause friction in how you relate to others and how you lead. We eliminated the typical hierarchy. You know, most corporates and businesses have all these layers of the way things are done and the games that you need to play. So those games just disappeared. So by eliminating friction, we had people didn't have friction in their lives. As leaders, we were able to allow everyone to be themselves, and the business itself didn't have friction. I think culture trumps everything. It is the ability to withstand any challenge and innovate. So we got that right.
And I think we've been very privileged to have had the influence of Sam's mom and dad living with us, and God gave us that rich, few years with mom and my parents living with us now. We see their hurts. We see they talk about the past with fondness. They talk about where they lived with fondness, because that is when they had everything they needed, but they don't dwell on the destruction of it. But they do talk about the hardship and how God has carried them through that. And we have learned that in the hardship of Sam's business, there's always been but God. What is God's plan and purpose?
God is God. God is the ultimate Father. So God is God at the bottom in the same way that God is God at the top. And when I'm at the bottom, I'm like in the depths, and I went there, staring into the abyss. God is still God.
Sam's journey through the devastation of African Bank taught us all as a family, our identity first and foremost is in Christ. Not I work for momentum, I come from this corporate, or I have X amount in my bank account. That's not our identity. Because if God strips it and takes it all away, what is your anchor? Who do you go to?
Are you in right standing with God? That would be the single question. If we ask that would always be the question. The question from my late parents, and even Colleen's parents that are living with us now. That's their single question. Are you in right standing with God?
The idea of worshiping work or making work into an idol or a god may sound strange to you, but it is a temptation that every entrepreneur will face. The very first of the 10 commandments God gave to Israel was that they should have no other gods before him, which meant that they were not to love or serve anyone or anything more than the true God, and neither were they to derive identity and meaning from anyone or anything other than the true God. Work for the believer is meant to be an expression of worship to God as the one our hearts most desire, but work can so easily become this if we're not careful. This counterfeit God to satisfy their love of money, or to give a sense of significance and self-worth, or to reach a specific status and power. But the God of work requires sacrifice. It calls for your attention from things like time with family, your values, your integrity, your physical and emotional health, generosity with your time and money. Absolutely everything is fair game once the heart is set on an idolatrous course. Suppose that during the course of a sales pitch, it becomes clear that the only way to secure new business is to pay a small bribe to the client's procurement manager. If money and success are more important to you than obeying God, you will easily sacrifice your values for the sake of closing the deal. Or think about the entrepreneur who, craving the adulation of his business peers, spends every weekend working on their business rather than spending time with their family. In both examples, work is no longer an act of worship to God, but has become a false god. A person in the story has sacrificed their family and their integrity on the altar of gaining wealth and the praise of others. None of us set out to worship this false god, so where does it come from? Behind the sin of idolatry is a hope of finding ultimate satisfaction and meaning in something other than God. Few men in history have been afforded the kind of opportunity to explore this hope to the degree that King Solomon did. He was so wealthy that no avenue of human pleasure and satisfaction was beyond him. Toward the end of his life, he took time to reflect on his findings and recorded them in the book of Ecclesiastes. After listing some of his great projects and his vast assets, such as houses, vineyards, flocks and herds, silver and gold, he had this to say in Ecclesiastes chapter 2 from verse 10 to 11. He says, "I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward of my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. At first glance, it may appear that Solomon is teaching that human work is ultimately meaningless, but that's not the message of the book of Ecclesiastes. The message is that however difficult things may be because of the curse on mankind in this fallen world, there is purpose and meaning to be found in walking with God. One commentator puts it this way: the very gifts of God that, apart from God, prove hollow and disappointing, can be enjoyed truly and satisfyingly, not as the main purposes of life, but as a means to know God in a deeper way. Solomon's words are a particular gift to faith-driven entrepreneurs because by virtue of your calling, you will face many of the challenges, temptations, and questions that he did. As you take his words to heart, you will do well to remember that this was a man who, according to Scripture, was blessed with wisdom like no one before or after him. He lived out your wildest dreams and came to the conclusion that nothing in the world comes close to satisfying the human heart like God does. Love your work, be excellent at your work, but don't turn your work into your God. Discuss this with your groups, how you can keep God and work in their appropriate places.